play and call it work.
Firedrake Master Caudata Shiel considered the events of the last 12 hours and wondered how such madness could have been visited upon the Imperium. Horus had turned his back on the Emperor and forsaken his oath to serve the Imperium of Man as War Master. Shiel had been ordered by his master Vulcan to take his ships and rendezvous with forces from the Alpha Legion to form part of the third wave of reinforcements to arrive at Istavan 5. Preparations were underway for the mixed Alpha Legion and Salamander's fleet to jump together to the Istavan system. But it would seem that Shielan warriors were not destined to stand alongside their gene father. The Salamanders were taken by surprise as a numerically superior Alpha Legion fleet opened fire without warning. Slow to react to the treachery, the Salamanders began losing ships at an alarming rate. Boarding torpedoes slammed into Shiel's vessel and disgorged enemy troops eager to capture the weakened cruiser. Seeing little other option, Shiel ordered an emergency warp jump. The battle aboard the cruiser continued to rage as both the Alpha Legion and Salamanders vied for control of the vital systems. The Alpha Legion had managed to land a sizable force, and their commander was evidently skilled in conducting brutal hit-and-run warfare. The Salamanders were being worn down, and there was little chance of them prevailing in the cramped corridors. The decision was made to scuttle the ship and deny the Alpha Legion the chance to capture their prize. As the cruiser tore its way back into the material realm, the navigators were unsure of exactly where they had found themselves, but the augury scanner showed 3 objects of note. The first was an unknown planet that appeared to be capable of sustaining life. The second was an Iron Warrior's Grand Cruiser, in the midst of unleashing one fearsome broadside after another. The third was an Imperial Fist strike cruiser that was the target of the Grand Cruiser's fury. The long-range Vox chimed as an incoming message was received from the Iron Warrior's Grand Cruiser and broadcast throughout the Salamander's command center. "Do not attempt to interfere here. Power down your shields and weapon batteries. If you disobey these orders, we will destroy you." Seconds later, another message was broadcast from the Imperial Fist cruiser. "Sons of Nocturne, are you still loyal to the Emperor, or have you too forsaken your oaths of allegiance?" Shiel immediately responded to the Fist and declared his ongoing loyalty to the Master of Mankind. In a flurry of Vox messages, Shiel learned that the Imperial Fist ship had been lured here with a distress signal and ambushed by the forces of Perturabo. Both Iron Warriors and Imperial Fists were already present on the surface of the planet and engaged in a bitter struggle. The Imperial Fist ship was attempting to break free and carry warning to the Imperium, and although Shiel could not directly engage the Iron Warrior ship, he declared his intention to destroy the ship and then set a collision course with the Grand Cruiser. The Imperial Fist sent one last message as the Iron Warrior ship terminated pursuit in its attempt to avoid the stricken Salamander's vessel. "Seek out Champion Tancred when you make planetfall. He leads the attack against the Iron Warriors on the surface. Your actions will not be forgotten. Destroy the traitors, Imperator Volt." Various lightning crafts streaked towards the planet as both Salamanders and Alpha Legion fled the doomed cruiser. A massive explosion blossomed in the void as the warp drive of the Salamander ship went critical. Welcome everybody to our Victory is Vengeance 30k narrative campaign. This is going to be a Loyalist versus Traitor narrative campaign with Josh and I taking on the part of the Loyalist of Salamanders and Imperial Fists, and then Quirk and Steve taking the part of the Traitors as Alpha Legion and Iron Warriors. Victory's Vengeance is a special narrative campaign, or a campaign system, that Games Workshop actually created in Horus Heresy Book number 3. So all the rules can be found there, but I'm going to go over the basics here, and I think we've made a couple modifications just to make it suit our needs a lot better than what it was for before. It was written, I believe, in an older edition of 40k. There's a couple evidences of that, but for the most part, you can use everything just as is and have a lot of fun with it. The purpose of the Victory is Vengeance campaign is to recreate some of the bitter battles during the Horus Heresy that have to do with the leftovers of the forces. The one that's actually in Horus Heresy Book 3 is supposed to represent the aftermath of the Istavan massacre, where there's just the leftovers of just a few forces on Istavan 5. However, they suggest in the rules that you can use the same rules to make your own campaign of some sort of aftermath. So the idea is that there's not full forces battling each other, but the leftovers after some battle. So Josh wrote the narrative that you just heard, where there's basically just a bit of Salamanders and Imperial Fists fighting against just a small amount of Alpha Legion and Iron Warriors. And it's called Victory is Vengeance because typically it's the Loyalist getting vengeance for what the traitors have done. But in the end, it's just a bunch of small forces fighting, where it's just like it's a fight of attrition, and you see if you can do enough damage to your opponent. It's not so much about being able to escape and survive. It's about more just the vengeance of doing as much damage to make up for whatever losses that you had done as well. And so it's a very negative campaign in that way, where it's more likely that you're going to suffer losses over the campaign than be able to create super awesome characters and super awesome armies. It's also meant to be fought at a much smaller scale. The typical size games are anywhere from 350 to 500 points in size, not really any bigger than that typically. It's kind of like Kill Team in that sense, but it has its own set of rules for how you work with your units. It also completely revamps the morale and pinning system. Overwatch is different. There's no such thing as lookout sirs. There's no challenges. Everything is just a desperate attempt to do as much damage to your opponents as possible throughout the campaign. To start, you have 150 points to build one hero and 1 to 2 leaders with. Your hero never dies. That is a very important distinction. Leaders can die, but heroes never die. If they die in a mission, then they roll on a table to see what bad thing happens to them. And that thing is semi-permanent. You can spend some action points to get rid of it, or you can try to redeem yourself of that trait, but you're probably more often going to find your heroes downgrading than actually upgrading. And these downgrades can be devastating. Anything from having to roll extra dice for your morale and pinning checks, to not being able to fight as well in close combat, to not being able to see well, to your followers downright refusing to join them in a squad. There's a lot of bad stuff that can happen to you. And the heroes and leaders, though, are the pivotal part of your army, because they are the only thing that remains semi-constant throughout the campaign. The hero remains constant. The leaders can die, but you can also get new leaders. But every game you can build a new force, but you always start with your heroes and leaders. And so that 150 points is pretty much free. So when we say you can bring 300 points of guys, that's on top of whatever heroes and leaders that you happen to have. Throughout the campaign, you have to keep track of 3 resources. You have your ammo, your personnel, and your armor. And these resources range from non-existence all the way to abundant. There's 5 levels. We're going to be starting our campaign with everybody starting at the plentiful level, which is the 4th level, which basically your ammo rolls are on a 3+. So every time you shoot, if anybody rolls a 1, then you have to make an ammo roll. And in the case of plentiful, it's 3+, but that ammo roll can be anywhere from a 2+ to a 6+, depending on how well you're doing in the campaign. If you fail the ammo roll, then that squad has to snap fire until the end of their next shooting phase. It kind of represents them running out of their ammo. There is also the personnel, which can allow you to bring 200 to 350 points of guys. So at the start of the campaign, everybody's going to have plentiful, which allows them to bring 300 points, plus your heroes and leaders. And then if you go up to abundant, you can bring 350 points. And if you go down to non-existent, you bring 200 points. Then you have your armor, which it can really hurt you. It basically makes you roll extra dice for running and take your worst one, extra dice for rolling your charges, all the way down to not being able to run or turbo boost, and that you have to roll extra dice for your charges and runs and discard the best ones, and getting -1 initiative if you get really scarce or non-existent on that resource. In the book, you can see that there's the grades. There's an upkeep cost. You can earn supply points in your missions, and you have to pay the supply points to upkeep them. So everybody's at plentiful, so they need 30 supply points to maintain that, because it's 10 each. So let's say you didn't have 30 supply points, you only had 20. Well, you could pay 10 points to maintain 2 of them, so that'd be 20, and then the other one would drop down a level. Alternatively, you can spend the next level up of points, so I could spend 15 points to bring my ammo from a 3+ to a 2+, but then the next game I'm going to have to pay 15 just to keep it there, otherwise it'll drop down 1 level. So every time you fail to pay the supply points, you drop down 1 level. So if you didn't get any supply points, you drop everything down to lacking, and then it's only 5 supply points. So it's a lot easier to maintain the lower levels, but you have some serious disadvantages if you do that. When you build your armies, you don't build it using any force organization whatsoever. There is no limit, with certain exceptions. The first thing is, when you buy models, you buy them individually. So if I wanted to buy a veteran Marine, the way you know how many points to spend is you look at the cost of adding a Marine to the squad. In the case of veterans, it's 12 points. So I pay 12 points per veteran. When I build my heroes and leaders, they have to be characters, and they have to be non-unique characters. And that would include things like a sergeant of a heavy support squad, or maybe this is a sergeant of a veteran squad. And in the case of Josh's Imperial Fist, he's got some sword brethren, Basically, anything that has the character rule or the chosen rule can be chosen as a hero and leader. And conversely, when you're building your rank and file guys, they cannot be characters, but they can be chosen. So if they're chosen, you can choose if they're characters or not characters individually. So you could have some over here and some of them over here. And so it's really interesting because it totally changes up the points cost. To determine the points cost of heroes and leaders, you look at the points cost of adding an individual model, and then you add 10 to that. So for example, if I wanted a veteran sergeant as one of my leaders, he would cost 22 points base, 12 points for adding a veteran, and then plus 10, and then I'd have to pay for any upgrades that he does have as well. You still have to adhere to restrictions. For example, veterans need you to have every 5 guys can take a special weapon. So you wouldn't be able to just put one veteran in and give him a missile launcher. You'd have to buy 5 of them, but they'd still be bought individually, so they don't necessarily form a squad together on the battlefield. We'll talk about how that works in a moment. So really the limit, and you're not allowed to have super heavies as well. But when you're looking at your points cost, you could bring in things like dreadnoughts, you could bring in things like predators and other vehicles, but this game is not balanced by any stretch. So if you are going to play it with your friends, you have to make sure that you agree to what you're going to bring in that mission. Because if somebody decides to bring 2 dreadnoughts and you bring all just regular guys, then you're going to have a hard time against them. Furthermore, there's a lot of missions that require you to kill a certain number of guys, and so you really need to learn to see what the missions do before you start building your armies. Otherwise, you could really cheese things out, and we're going to do our best to not do that. We're going to have a lot of discussions amongst ourselves as we build our armies so that it can be a lot of fun that way. When you're deploying, you create ad hoc units. So you could keep everybody individual, but there are lots of advantages to making units. Ad hoc units are a combination of any number of identical types of models. So for example, you can put infantry together, but you couldn't combine infantry with bikes. But you could combine regular infantry with jump infantry. But then the jump infantry would have to act just like regular infantry. So for example, I could take my Fire Drake Master as his hero, and I could give him a couple veterans, and then I can give him this heavy support guy with his Volkite Culverin, and that could be a squad. Now during the game, the characters can leave a squad, and when they leave the squad, they can take any number of the guys with them that they want, so they can help to reform new squads. But a squad without a leader cannot change how it is composed. So Fire Drake Master could join the squad, and then in the next turn he could take one guy with them, and these 2 guys would then be another unit. So you have this really cool concept of being able to change units on the fly. Furthermore, if you have a transport, then any number of units can go inside the transport, as long, obviously the Fire Drake Master couldn't go in there because he is a Terminator and they're not allowed to ride in rhinos. But let's say we had a unit of 3, a unit of 2, and a unit of 3. If they all could embark, then they could actually all go on the vehicle. And then when they disembark, while on the vehicle, they basically no longer are a unit. When they leave the vehicle, they can then reform however they want, even if there is no character inside of there. So one guy could disembark this way, 2 could disembark this way and join a unit, or be a unit. 3 could disembark over here to make another unit, and these 2 could stay inside of the Rhino and fire out of its access point. And you can even disembark and then move the Rhino 6 inches and disembark more guys. So you can have a lot of flexibility in how you move your guys around the table. Furthermore, morale and pinning is totally different, and basically at the end of every shooting phase, squads that have taken casualties or even just taken hits or wounds that they have saved will be taking pinning or morale checks. The way pinning works is if you get hit by a weapon with pinning, or if you take 1 wound, even if you save it. So if this squad fires at this squad and causes 1 wound and they save it, they'll still have to take a pinning check at the end of the phase. If another squad also causes a pinning check on them, then that pinning check would be at -1, and so on and so forth. So 3 squads all cause a pinning check on this, then they'd have to do a pinning check at -2 at the end of the phase. If they pass the pinning check, then they might have to take a morale check. If they take any casualties or any wounds from any shooting, then after they pass their pinning check, they have to make a morale check. If they fail the pinning check, they'll go to ground and they will not have to take a morale check. So if they lose at least 1 model, so let's say this squad fired at them and killed that model, and then this squad fired at them and caused a wound, but then they saved that wound, then first we'd have to take a pinning check at -1, because they both caused pinning, because they both caused a wound, saved or unsaved. And let's say they passed that, then they'd have to take a morale check, but in this case there'd be no modifier because only 1 squad caused a morale check. Now let's say this squad had fired and killed a guy, then we'd have a pinning check at -1 because they both caused pinning, and then a morale check at -1 because they both caused that. So obviously special rules like stubborn will stop the modifiers, or in the case of salamanders, they get to re-roll 1 die if they fail a pinning or morale. You can still use those, And I know Iron Warriors, I think they ignore morale or pinning, one or the other, or maybe both, when it comes to shooting. So all those special rules will still come into play. Very few things are fearless, though, although there are ways to become that throughout the game. Another thing to be careful of with your heroes and leaders is there are no lookout sirs in Victory's Vengeance. So if he's out front, then he has to take all those first wounds. There's also no challenges, and so close combat can be a little more brutal. On top of that, there's something called reactionary fire. If you have played Zone Mortalis and you're kind of familiar with this, essentially if I decide to charge here, and these guys are not out of ammo, then if they pass an initiative test on their majority initiative, then all assault, rapid fire, and pistol weapons can fire at full ballistic skill, unless they're also relentless, in which case even heavy weapons can fire at full ballistic skill. So it's very dangerous, because I decide to charge, this squad could get an entire free shooting attack. On top of that, that Overwatch does cause pinning and morale, just like if it was a regular shooting attack, assuming that they cause wounds or cause unsaved wounds. And so you could fail your charge because you then failed a pinning or morale check. And that's very different than regular 40k rules. So charging became even more difficult because of that. Now, of course, if you can pin them before you charge them, then they're not allowed to Overwatch, and that wouldn't be a problem. Or if you know they're out of ammo, then they'll just have to snap fire just like everybody else. And Wall of Death just works the same way for Flamers, where you just get the D3 automatic hits, whether you pass that initiative test or not. Unless, of course, you were out of ammo, and then you cannot use your Flamers to do Overwatch, because they cannot snap fire. One thing your heroes and leaders do for you is help you to acquire action points. Leaders automatically give you 2 action points at the beginning of every game. Action points carry on between the games. Your hero is given a strike force role. Anything from, in the case of my Fire Drake Master, is going to be Paragon. At the end of the movement phase, every one of my units that's behind the Fire Drake Master in relation to the enemy, so if he's right here, and I had these 2 units, then I'd get 2 action points because he is closer to the enemy than them, because he's leading the charge. And if he's back here, let's say this squad was out front, and this includes his own squad, then he would only get 1 because this one's closer and this one's further away. There's also other ones where every wound you cause in shooting is an action point. There's other ones that for every wound or every hit that your hero takes, the martyr one, then you get action points. Action points can be used to re-roll dice. So if you have a hero or a leader as part of a squad and you don't like what you rolled, then every action point you spend allows you to re-roll a single die. Or in the case of things that require multiple dice, like morale checks, you re-roll the entire thing instead. And so you can burn through your action points that way. If you happen to have 10 or more action points at the end of the game and your hero survived, then you can spend 10 action points to upgrade one of his stats, like weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, by 1. But you can only ever do that once per hero. Like you can't upgrade his strength more than once or his toughness more than once. Or you can spend 10 action points to remove one of the consequences from him dying. So action points are very important for you to earn. And like I said, your leader's given a couple to you automatically at the beginning of each game, but your heroes have to earn them. But the heroes can really rack up action points if they choose the right role and then really work hard to fulfill that role. We will be doing a few games per week. Today, all of the games will be available for free. That is the exception to the rule of what we normally do with our narrative campaigns. We're going to have 3 games go up today. They're already up by the time you're watching this, and all 3 are free. Normally, the first one would be free, and the other 2 would be in the MiniWarGaming Vault. We have a special offer going on right now. If you click the link in the video description below to become a Vault member, getting a free 7-day trial, and you do it before our next set of Victory's Vengeance battle reports go out next Wednesday, then even if you cancel your Vault membership, you get free access to this entire campaign as it comes out without having to be a Vault membership. So basically it's a giveaway for this campaign if you become a Vault member. If you're already a Vault member, no worries, you're going to get it just like you would normally anyways. And like I said, starting next week, the first one will be free, and then the other 2 will be in the MiniWarGaming Vault. So there's a limited offer available below now. Also in the description below will be the links to the 3 games that we have out today, which you can go and check out right now. It's going to be Quirk's Alpha Legion facing off against Salamanders and Imperial Fists in the 3 games. So we'll be going back and forth. And then Steve's Iron Warriors will be joining us next week for those games as we continue the narrative of seeing how much damage we can do to each other and how our characters grow and upgrade and downgrade and how desperate this battle becomes. Thanks so much for watching. Happy wargaming.